This installment of our series on Simulation and Immersion will look at setting a scene. So this is really the first section of actual play that we're getting into. So without further ado, setting a scene. In a simulation-styled game, a scene is not focused on what the GM wants to have happen. What a novel or film would tend to have happen, or what the players think might be cool to have happen. It is instead focused on what is actually happening as a result of what people are actually accomplishing in the scene. This requires that the GM work hard assessing what each set of characters under their control knows at that moment, how they react to that knowledge or lack of knowledge, and how their attempts to act turn out. This also requires that the players work hard assessing what is going on, what they can do, what can be done to them, and what steps they should take to ensure things start to or continue to go their way in the future. Just like in real life, the characters, through the decisions of the players, are attempting to be the authors of their own lives. They are not waiting for the narrator in the sky to shift them from one plot point to another. Success or failure in any of these endeavors is resolved according to the rules of the game. And for the sake of immersion, the rules should be handled with as minimal fuss as possible, and each player at the table, from the game master down to the newest player, should endeavor to become as conversant as possible with those rules that tend to be invoked for their characters or for their role in the game as soon as possible. The more you know about how your roles work, the less involved calling for those roles is, the less disruptive. Like the players, any situation which would tax the NPC's capabilities should be resolved according to the standard rules of the game. In very complex or detail-heavy systems, it may be necessary to devise, or in a system that includes it, employ a shorthand mechanic for some situations. This same mechanic may become useful to have for the player characters over time as the campaign ages. We'll discuss that in a later clip, but an example of what I'm talking about is taking the average in the Ubiquity role-playing system. A core mechanic in place to assess when it is not necessary to roll and how to gauge the average quality of success that that particular character would have in that situation. This all sounds very complicated. It sounds like a lot of things going on, and it is, but this process quickly becomes second nature and winds up taking the same or fewer mental resources as plotting a story, and it generally takes less time. It is based on asking yourself questions, whether as player or as GM. And the questions asked are ones which are a part of our daily lives already. They boil down to, what the hell is that guy doing, and what the hell is going on? Easy enough, right? Okay, so knowledge. There are some questions that we need to ask ourselves. Some of these relate to knowledge. So knowledge questions to ask yourself. Who knows what, and how do they know it? How quickly can and will they be updated? How accurate are their sources? How much and how often do they need to interpret information versus just receiving it? How good are they at interpreting this type of information that they are receiving right now? How accurately does information and the direction to act on that information flow from the central figures in the scene? How dedicated are central figures to each thread connected to them? How dedicated are their forces? What distractions might interfere with action at this time? This sounds like a long laundry list of things, but the way to get to these questions is to put yourself in the shoes of the characters that are involved. What would they really do if this were real, if there were consequences, if there was a tomorrow? You're not looking for the dramatic answer to a scene. You're not looking for a way to make things exciting. You're looking for what would really happen. Action. After knowledge comes action. Action questions to ask yourself. Who can act at this time, and how well? What factors contribute to this status? Where do the ripples from action go, and what effect do they have when they get there? Is the action that's being witnessed or taken, is it genuine? Is it a lure? Is it a complete action in itself, or is it just a part of a series of actions? Time. Knowledge, action, time. Time questions to ask yourself. How much time is there to act? What factors are extending or limiting time frames for each agenda and set of actions? In what sequence are action results occurring? Are results interacting with, interrupting, or paralleling each other? How is the overall timeline being affected by the events of this scene? How are individual timelines being affected? This installment is quite long and not easily broken up into parts, so this part ends the establishment of concept. The next two parts are individual examples. One for establishing a first scene in a new simulationist campaign, and the second one for establishing a typical scene. I hope you watch those too, and let's talk about things.